The sun out here doesn't just shine on you, it puts you in an interrogation chair. It bleaches bone, cracks the earth, and it pulls every secret a man thinks he's buried right out into the open. For me, Cormac Riley, those secrets were a herd of ghosts I'd been driving for 5 long years. I'd built a whole life, a whole ranch, a fortress of quiet just to keep 'em penned in. But on a dust-choked Tuesday, two shadows fell across my door. They were boys I once knew, now just hollowed-out men with desperation burning in their eyes. And they came to me with a proposal that was part plea and part pure poison. They came to sell me their sister. The dust of the Chihuahuan desert was a part of everything I owned. It settled on the rough-hewn porch of my ranch house. It coated the hides of my prime Hereford cattle, and it worked its way deep into the lines around my eyes. Lines that had no business being on a man of 28. The Broken Spur Ranch wasn't a name I picked for its poetry. It was a statement, a testament to a second chance I'd clawed out of this dirt with sweat, grit, and the deliberate act of forgetting a life I left behind. A life I left in a town called Redemption Gulch. I was checking the cinch on my buckskin mare when I saw them coming. Two riders. They weren't moving with the easy lope of neighbors stopping by for coffee. They moved with the stiff-backed urgency of men carrying a casket. As they got closer, recognition hit me like a mule kick to the gut. It coiled up inside me, cold and heavy. Gideon and Nathaniel Bishop. Thinner, harder, but it was them. The brothers of Illa. My hand didn't go to the Colt Peacemaker on my hip, but it hovered close. A habit you pick up fast in a land where a man's intentions are often written in drawn steel. I stood up straight, letting my face go blank as a stone wall, and I waited. Gideon, the older one, swung down from his exhausted-looking roan. He was all sharp angles and nervous energy, his eyes darting from me to my solid-looking ranch house and back again, like he was sizing it all up. Nathaniel, younger by 2 years, he just stayed on his horse, his gaze locked on his saddle horn like it held all the answers to the universe. "Riley," Gideon said, his voice raspy with trail dust. He swiped a dirty sleeve across his mouth. "It's been a long time." "Bishop," I said back, my tone flat as a salt pan. "This is a far ride from your father's land. Something amiss?" Gideon tried to pull off a confident smile, but it was a miserable failure. It just made him look more pathetic. "You could say that. We, uh, we heard you done well for yourself out here. The Broken Spur. Good name. Got a reputation for solid stock." "I manage," I said. My patience was already wearing thin. The Bishop boys had never wasted a single breath on pleasantries unless they were about to ask for something you didn't want to give. A heavy silence fell between us, broken only by the creak of saddle leather and the lowing of a distant calf. It stretched on, thick and uncomfortable. It was Gideon who finally broke it, the words tumbling out of him in a rush of shame and pure desperation. "We've come with a proposition," he said. "A business matter." I raised an eyebrow. "I'm not looking for partners." "This ain't that kind of business." Gideon took a deep breath, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. He shot a quick glance at his brother, who still wouldn't look up from his saddle. "It's about Illa." The name landed in the space between us like a lit match on dry tinder. 5 years. 5 years I had spent building walls around the memory of that name. 5 years trying to forget the sound of her laughter, like wind chimes on a summer evening. 5 years trying to bury the promise I'd made her, and the promise I'd broken. "What about her?" My voice came out low, dangerous, a growl I hadn't used in a long, long time. She's refused a marriage proposal," Gideon stammered, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "From Beaufort Langdon." I knew the name. Everybody knew the name. Langdon owned the biggest spread in the county, controlled the water rights upstream, and had a nasty reputation as a man who collected things. Land, power, and, it was rumored, people. He was twice Illa's age, a widower with a cruel streak and an ego as wide as the Arizona territory. A little bit of pride flickered through the surprise. That was the Illa I remembered. "Good for her," I said. "Illa always did have a spine of her own." "You don't understand," Gideon snapped, his composure finally cracking wide open. "It ain't that simple. Pa's will. It was specific. Damn specific." He swallowed hard. Said if Illa wasn't wed by her 22nd birthday, the ranch, the whole property, would be forfeit. The bank in Tucson holds the note. We'd be left with nothing. Dust. He paused, letting the weight of it sink in. Her birthday is in 3 weeks. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening finality. Old man Bishop, a stern and controlling bastard, even from the grave, had tried to chain his daughter's future to his own legacy. He'd put a leash on her, even after he was gone. So you tried to marry her off to Langdon to save your own hides, I said, the contempt in my voice as sharp as a skinning knife. He was the only one who could cover the debts Pa left. He made a good offer. Nathaniel suddenly spoke up, his voice cracking like a boy's. We thought she'd see reason. And when she didn't? I pressed, my gaze locking onto Gideon, pinning him where he stood. Gideon looked away, his eyes finding the hazy mountains on the horizon. His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, heavy with shame. Langdon was furious, humiliated. He's called in his markers, Riley. He's squeezing us dry. He's told folks not to buy our cattle, not to sell us seed. We're ruined. He took another shaky breath. But he said there was another way, an alternative. My blood ran cold. I already knew where this was going. I could feel it in my bones. He offered to buy her, Gideon choked out, the words finally escaping him. Not as a wife, just to buy her for his service, as a housekeeper. You know what that means, a contract of indenture. He'd own her, Riley, and he'd own our silence and forgive the debt. The image was so vile, so monstrous, that for a moment I couldn't breathe. Illa, my Illa, with her fierce intelligence and her untamable spirit, reduced to a piece of property, a slave to a man like Langdon. It was unthinkable. Then came the final, gut-wrenching turn of the screw. So we came to you, Gideon said, his eyes finally meeting mine, pleading and wretched. We can't do it. We can't give her to him, but we're ruined either way. So we're giving you the same chance, a better one. He looked down at the dust, then back up at me. Please buy our sister. You're a rich man now. Name a price, $1,000. It's less than the debt. You'd be saving her from Langdon. It's the only decent thing left to do. The world narrowed to the space between the three of us. The sun beat down, merciless. The air was thick with the stench of their cowardice. They weren't selling her to save her. They were selling her to save themselves, just dressing it up in the rags of mercy. They were offering me the chance to own the very woman I'd once sworn to love, to protect, to come back for. 5 years ago, I had stood with Illa under a cottonwood tree by the creek. I was a penniless ranch hand back then, with nothing to offer her but calloused hands and a pocket full of dreams. I'm going to make something of myself, Illa, I'd said, holding her hands in mine. I'm going to build a place for us. A real place. I'll come back for you. I swear it. And then I'd left. I'd written once, a single letter full of hardship and struggle, full of hope. Then the letters had stopped. The shame of my slow progress, the gut-deep fear that I wasn't good enough for her, had silenced me. By the time I'd scraped together enough to buy the first acres of the broken spur, 2 years had passed. Pride, that cruelest of masters, had kept me from riding back to her a failure. And now all my success felt like a pile of ashes in my mouth. I looked at the two wretched figures standing before me. I could send them away. I could let fate and Beaufort Langdon have their way. I could stay right here in my fortress of solitude, with my ghosts and my gut-eating regret. Or I could ride straight back into the heart of my own failure, the heart I thought I'd lost, the one I'd buried under years of dust and hard work, gave a powerful, painful thud against my ribs. It was still there, and it was bleeding. I'm not buying her, I said. My voice was a low growl that made both brothers flinch. Gideon's face fell into a mask of despair. Riley, please. Get off your horse, Nathaniel, I commanded. You'll both ride back with fresh mounts. I'm keeping your nags for the trouble you've caused. I walked to my own mare, my movements precise and deliberate, every muscle tight. I swung myself into the saddle. There's only one way to fix this mess. I'm going to marry her. The ride to Redemption Gulch was a journey through a landscape of my own ghosts. Every mesa, every arroyo, held a memory I had spent 5 years trying to outrun. I saw the spot by the creek where I'd first kissed Isla, a clumsy, heartfelt collision in the moonlight that had set my world on fire. I passed the ridge where we'd watched a meteor shower, her head resting on my shoulder, our futures feeling as bright and endless as the stars above. Now those same stars just felt like mocking eyes watching me ride back to face the wreckage I'd made. I rode with Gideon, the two of us wrapped in a thick, suffocating silence. Nathaniel had been sent on ahead to deliver the news, a task I imagined the younger bishop would perform with all the grace of a spooked colt. He was probably making things worse right at this very moment. When the Bishop homestead finally came into view, it was a portrait of decay. The fences sagged like tired old men. The paint on the house was peeling like sunburnt skin. The fields lay fallow and dusty, choking on their own failure. This wasn't the vibrant, prosperous home I remembered. This was a place with a noose tightening around its neck, and Beaufort Langdon was the one holding the rope. Nathaniel was waiting on the porch, wringing his hands, looking like he was about to be sick. "She's in the parlor," he squeaked. She ain't happy, Cormac." "I wouldn't be either," I said, swinging down from my mare. I handed the reins to Gideon without even looking at him. "This is your doing. Remember that." I walked up the warped wooden steps, my spurs ringing a somber toll. I pushed open the front door and stepped inside. The parlor was dark, the heavy curtains drawn tight against the punishing sun. And there she was. Illa Bishop stood by the cold, empty fireplace, ramrod straight. The 5 years hadn't softened her. They'd sharpened her. They'd taken the delicate lines of her face and carved them into a striking beauty that was more defiant than it was gentle. Her dark hair was pinned up, but rebellious strands had escaped, framing a face that was pale with fury. Her eyes, the color of rich, dark earth, fixed on me. They held no warmth, no flicker of old affection. They held a hurricane of betrayal. "So this is it," she said, her voice dangerously calm, colder than a winter night. "The prodigal suitor returns, not with a ring, but with a bill of sale. Have my brothers informed you of my price?" The words were poisoned darts, and every one of them found its mark. "Illa, it's not like that." "Isn't it?" she shot back, taking a step toward me, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "They came to you because their first buyer, the esteemed Mr. Langdon, was perhaps too crude in his negotiations. So they offered a more sentimental option. Did you haggle? Did you get a discount for our shared history?" "Stop it!" My voice was rough, torn from my throat. "I told them I wouldn't buy you. I'm here to marry you, to get you away from Langdon, and to save this ranch for your family." She let out a short, bitter laugh that held no humor at all. "Oh, how noble! Cormac Riley, the White Knight, riding in 5 years too late. Where were you when Pa died? Where were you when the letter stopped? Did you build your precious ranch and just forget all the promises you made under the cottonwoods?" Every question was another twist of the knife in a wound that had never healed. "It was complicated," I managed to say. "Complicated?" She repeated the word, dripping it with pure scorn. "Was it complicated when you decided my future for me? Just like they did? Just like my father did from his grave? You walk in here after 5 years of absolute silence and announce you're going to marry me as if I'm some stray calf you're claiming. You're no different from them. You're no different from Langdon. You all see me as a problem to be solved, a property to be managed." And in that moment, I knew she was right. In my haste to act, in my own damn arrogance, I had done exactly that. I had seen the problem, Langdon, and I had sought the quickest solution, completely forgetting that the heart of the matter was a woman with a will of steel and a soul of her own. I took a step closer, my hands open at my sides, a gesture of surrender. "You're right," I said, and the admission cost me dearly. I was wrong. Wrong to approach it this way, to not come to you first. But Illa, look around you. Your brothers are terrified. Langdon is a snake, and he's coiling himself around this whole valley. He won't just take this land. He will break you for the sheer pleasure of it, just because you dared to say no to him. I had to make her see. This, this marriage, it doesn't have to be real. It can be a shield, a temporary one. We file the papers, satisfy the terms of the will, and get Langdon off your back. When it's safe, we can have it annulled. You'll be free. Your family's home will be secure. Think of it as a business arrangement, a partnership against a common enemy. I watched her, saw the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. She was trapped, and she knew it. Her pride was at war with the stark, ugly reality of her situation. She glanced past me, at the shadows of her brothers lurking in the hallway, their faces a pathetic mixture of hope and shame. Her shoulders slumped, a barely perceptible surrender. A partnership, she said, her voice hollow, empty of all emotion. And what is your price, Cormac? What do you get from this arrangement? I get to sleep at night, I said, and it was the rawest truth I'd spoken in 5 years. I get to undo one mistake with one right action. The wedding, if you could even call it that, took place the very next day. It was a grim, hurried affair in the dusty, whiskey-soaked office of Judge Peterson. Sheriff Brody, a portly man with a permanent sheen of sweat on his brow and eyes that never quite met yours, served as a witness. I knew Brody was in Langdon's pocket, and the sheriff's presence felt more like a threat than a legal sanction. Ela wore a simple blue dress, her face pale and her expression completely unreadable. I stood beside her, feeling the crushing weight of the lie we were about to build our lives on. I said the words, my voice steady. Hers was a near whisper, barely audible. When the judge pronounced us man and wife, there was no kiss, no celebration. There was only the scratching of a pen on a piece of paper and the heavy, damning finality of it all. I took her back to the Broken Spur. I gave her the main bedroom and took the small cot in my office for myself. The silence in the ranch house that night was louder than any gunshot. We were husband and wife, bound by a legal document in a shared enemy, but separated by a canyon of hurt pride and 5 years of unspoken words. On the third night, as a storm gathered over the mountains, Illa found me on the porch. I was staring out at the flashes of lightning that illuminated the jagged horizon. He knows, she said quietly. I didn't have to ask who she meant. Figured he would. Brody would have run to him straight from the judge's office. What will he do? Langdon's a man of overwhelming pride, I said, turning to look at her. In the intermittent flashes of lightning, her face was a sculpture of anxiety. He won't take this lying down. He wasn't just denied a bride. He was beaten. Beaten by a man with a smaller ranch and a past he probably thinks he knows all about. He'll come at us. Not directly, not at first. He'll try to bleed me dry, just like he did to your brothers. Then this was for nothing, she whispered, her voice laced with despair. We've only traded one siege for another. No, I said, my voice hard with a resolve I didn't know I had. Your brother's ranch was weak because they were weak. The Broken Spur is not, and I am not your brother's. I looked straight at her, my gaze unwavering. He wanted to own you, Illa. Now he has to go through me, and I don't break easy. The storm finally broke then, and the rain came down in sheets, washing the dust from the air. But it did nothing to cleanse the suffocating tension that hung between the man and woman on the porch. A husband and wife who were total strangers living under their own roof. Beaufort Langdon didn't waste any time making his displeasure known. The first sign was subtle. The weekly supply wagon from Tucson, which had reliably serviced the Broken Spur for 2 years, just didn't arrive. When I rode into Redemption Gulch to ask about it, the proprietor of the general store, a nervous little man named Finn, couldn't look me in the eye. Wagon, broken axle, Cormac, Finn mumbled, fussing with a stack of canned peaches. Bad luck. I knew it wasn't bad luck. It was a warning shot fired across my bow. I bought what little I could, paying a premium for it, and rode back with the distinct feeling of being an outcast in a town I'd once called home. The second sign was the water. The creek that bisected my southern pasture, its source originating high up on Langdon's vast property, began to dwindle. Within a week, it was nothing more than a muddy trickle. I rode upstream and found exactly what I expected to find. A fresh, crudely built dam of rock and timber, diverting the entire flow of water towards Langdon's own thirsty fields. It was a blatant, aggressive act of theft. "That's it," I said, slamming my hat down on the dining table back at the ranch. My ranch hand, a gnarled and quiet old man named Gus, who'd been with me from the very start, looked on with grim understanding. Ela, who had been meticulously cleaning a rifle at the table, looked up. "You can't just ride over there and tear it down," she said. "He'll have men watching it. He wants a fight, but he wants it on his terms." I was struck by her tone. It wasn't panicked or despairing. It was analytical, sharp as a tack. In the weeks since our sham of a marriage, a strange rhythm had developed between us. We were polite, distant, two people sharing a space but not a life. Yet in the face of this external threat, the walls we'd built between us were beginning to show some cracks. "She's right, boss," Gus said, wiping his hands on a greasy rag. "Langdon's trying to bait you into doing something stupid, something Sheriff Brody can arrest you for. So I'm supposed to just sit here and watch my cattle die of thirst?" I growled, pacing the room like a caged wolf. "No," Ella said, setting the rifle down gently. She unrolled a topographical map of the county on the table, a map she'd quietly procured from her father's old study. Her finger traced a series of faint lines on the western edge of the Broken Spurs property. "You're supposed to outthink him." She looked up at me, her eyes clear and focused. "When I was a girl, my father used to talk about the old springs up in the Cinder Hills. He said they were unreliable, mostly dried up, but he also said that after a season of heavy rains, they sometimes flowed again. We had that big storm last week." Gus and I both leaned over the map, then looked at each other. The Cinder Hills were treacherous, rocky terrain, almost impossible to access. No one had bothered with them for years. It was a long shot, a damn long shot. "But it's a better shot than getting yourself killed over Langdon's dam," Gus admitted, rubbing his grizzled chin. For the next 2 days, Gus and I searched those hills. It was a grueling, sun-baked effort that yielded nothing but exhaustion and frustration. I returned to the ranch on the second evening, covered in dust and defeat, only to find Illa wasn't there. A knot of pure panic tightened in my chest. I was about to saddle a fresh horse and ride out looking for her when I saw her, riding in from the south, leading her mare. She slid from the saddle, her face smudged with dirt, but her eyes were shining with triumph. "I didn't go to the hills," she said, preempting my question. "I went to the library, or what passes for one in the town hall. I looked through the old county surveyor records." She pulled a carefully copied drawing from her saddlebag. "The maps you have are wrong. They're based on the survey of 1870. There was an earlier one from 62. The creek bed shifted after a big flood in 68. She spread the new map on the dusty porch railing. "According to this original survey, the spring isn't up in the hills. It's in that box canyon, less than a mile from here. The entrance is overgrown, but the deed to the Broken Spur is based on these original survey lines." She looked up at me, a small, triumphant smile playing on her lips. "That spring, it's on your land, Cormac." I just stared at her, then at the map, then back at her. It was brilliant. While I had been trying to solve the problem with muscle and sweat, she had been using her mind. The education her father had insisted upon was paying off in a way the old man could never have possibly imagined. The next morning, the three of us found the canyon entrance, hidden behind a thicket of mesquite and cholla. After an hour of clearing the way with axes and shovels, we found it. A small, steady stream of clear, cold water, seeping from a rock face, pooling in a basin before disappearing underground. It wasn't a river, but it was enough. It was life. As we worked together to dig a channel to our pasture, the shared labor began to erode the silence between Allah and me. I found myself watching her, admiring the determined set of her jaw as she worked, the surprising strength in her arms. I saw glimpses of the girl I had loved, now forged into a woman of incredible resilience and strength. One evening, as we sat on the porch, Gus having discreetly retired to the bunkhouse, Ela spoke into the comfortable quiet. "Why did you stop writing?" The question was soft, without any accusation, and it disarmed me completely. I stared into my cup of coffee for a long moment before I could answer. "Shame," I said, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. "My first year away was hard. I barely made enough to eat. I was sleeping in barns. I wrote you that once telling you it was tough, but that I'd make good. Then months went by, and I had nothing to show for it. I was too proud to write and tell you I was failing. I kept telling myself, just a little longer until I have some good news. By the time I bought the first piece of this place, so much time had passed. I figured you'd moved on, hated me even. It was just easier to stay away than to face what I'd broken. She was silent for a time, absorbing my confession. I didn't hate you, she said finally. I was hurt. I thought you'd forgotten me, or worse, that your promise meant nothing. Every day I'd watch the road. For 2 years, I watched. The simple image of her watching, waiting, was more devastating than any anger she could have ever shown me. It painted a picture of my failure in stark, painful detail. Before I could find the words to respond, the sound of a single horse approaching at a dead gallop cut through the night. We both stood instantly on alert. A rider burst into the lamplight of the yard, pulling his horse to a skidding, panicked halt. It was Nathaniel Bishop, his face pale with terror. "He's taken him!" Nathaniel cried, sliding from the saddle and stumbling toward the porch. "Langdon's men! They came to the ranch. They said Gideon was trespassing, rustling his own cattle that had wandered. It was a lie. They beat him, and they dragged him off. They've taken him to Langdon's place. Did they see you?" I demanded, already moving toward the barn. "No, I was out mending the north fence. I saw it all from a ridge." Nathaniel grabbed my arm, his eyes wild with fear and a terrible guilt. "But that's not all, Cormac. That's not the real reason I came." He took a ragged, shuddering breath. "This whole thing, it was worse than we told you. The will. Langdon helped Pa's lawyer draft it. He's been planning this for years, since before Pa even died. He wanted the land, and he wanted Illa." He choked on the words. "And the indenture contract he offered us. It wasn't for a housekeeper. I saw the papers. It was a transfer of ownership, to be sold to a man who runs a cat house in Sonora. Langdon wasn't going to keep her. He was going to punish her, ruin her, and then sell her across the border like livestock." Illa made a small, strangled sound, her hand flying to her mouth. The sheer, calculated evil of it was staggering. This was never about a spurned proposal. This was about a predator who had been stalking their family for years. My face went hard as granite. I had been fighting a businessman. I now understood I was fighting a monster. "Gus!" I yelled. "Saddle my mare! Grab the Winchester!" I turned to Ela. Her face was ashen, but her eyes were burning with a cold fire. "You're staying here. Lock the doors." "No," she said, her voice shaking, but firm as a rock. She picked up the rifle she had cleaned so meticulously. "Gideon is my brother. You are my husband, in name if not in truth. This is my fight too. I'm coming with you." I looked at her, at the rifle held steady in her hands, at the unyielding fire in her eyes. This was not the girl I had left behind. This was the woman who had survived in my absence. And in that moment, the lie of our marriage felt like the most profound truth in my life. "All right," I said, nodding slowly. "Stay close, and do exactly as I say." The Langdon Ranch wasn't a home. It was a fortress. A high palisade wall, built of sharpened logs, surrounded the main compound. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter, their silhouettes stark and menacing against the moonlit sky. It was a testament to a man who had as many enemies as he had acres of land. Ela, a reluctant but resolute Nathaniel, and I dismounted a half-mile away, tying our horses in a dense grove of ironwood trees. Gus had been left behind, under protest, to guard the broken spur. "This is suicide," Nathaniel whispered, his teeth chattering so loud I was surprised they couldn't hear him at the ranch. "There must be a dozen men in there." "We're not going through the front gate," I said, my eyes scanning the defenses. I wasn't just a rancher anymore. The instincts of a younger, wilder life, a life I thought I'd left behind, were taking over. "Ela, your map. Did it show the old irrigation ditch that fed this place before Langdon built his dam?" She nodded, pulling the worn paper from her jacket. "It runs along the eastern wall. It should be dry now." "A dry ditch is a trench," I said. "It'll get us to the wall unseen." I led them on a wide, silent circle, using every dip and shadow in the terrain for cover. We moved like ghosts. The only sounds are soft footfalls and the frantic pounding of our own hearts. We found the ditch, a deep, dry scar in the earth, and slipped inside. It was a perfect approach, leading us directly to the base of the palisade. Nathaniel, I ordered in a low voice, you know the layout. Where would he be keeping Gideon? The old smokehouse, probably, Nathaniel stammered. It's got a heavy door, no windows. He uses it as a cell. Show me. Peering through a tiny crack between two logs, Nathaniel pointed to a squat, solid-looking building near the back of the compound. Two guards stood near its door, sharing a bottle of whiskey and laughing loudly. All right, I said, formulating the plan, my voice a low hum. Ela, you're the best shot among us. You and Nathaniel find a position up on that woodpile over there. It'll give you a clear view of the yard. Do not fire unless I do. This is about getting Gideon out, not starting a war. I turned to Nathaniel, my eyes hard. If things go south, you get her out of here. That's your only job. Understood? Nathaniel, looking at his sister's determined face, nodded grimly. The scared boy was gone, replaced by a man facing the consequences of his own cowardice. While they scrambled into position, I pulled a kerchief over the lower half of my face. I checked my Colt, then drew the long, heavy skinning knife I always kept in my boot. I moved along the wall until I was at the rear of the compound near the stables. I found a loose board, a sign of lazy maintenance, and worked it free. I slipped inside the wall like a phantom. The yard was brightly lit by lanterns. Men were scattered about, some gambling, others drinking. Beaufort Langdon himself was on the porch of the main house, holding court, his booming laugh echoing across the compound like a death knell. I stayed in the shadows, moving with a predator's patience, from the stables to a water trough, then behind a stacked cord of firewood. I was a stone's throw from the smokehouse now. I watched the two guards, waiting, just waiting for my moment. It came when one of them turned to relieve himself against the wall, his back to his partner. I exploded from the darkness. Before the remaining guard could even register the movement, the butt of my Colt came down in a vicious arc, striking the man hard behind the ear. He crumpled without a sound. I caught him before he hit the ground, lowering him gently into the dust. The second guard, hearing a faint scuffle, turned, his hand already going for his gun. I threw the skinning knife. It spun end over end, a whisper of steel in the night, and thudded deep into the man's thigh, pinning him to the wooden wall of the smokehouse. The man screamed, a raw, piercing sound that cut through the night like a blade. The entire compound erupted. Men shouted, kicking over tables and drawing their weapons. Langdon, on the porch, froze for a split second before bellowing, "Find him! Shoot him on sight!" I was already at the smokehouse door. I fired a single shot that blew the heavy padlock apart. I wrenched the door open. Gideon Bishop was huddled inside, his face a swollen, bloody mess. "Cormac?" he croaked, disbelief in his eyes. "Can you walk?" I asked, hauling him to his feet. I think so." "Good." Just as we stepped out, a shot rang out from the woodpile. One of Langdon's men, who had a clear line of sight on us, spun around and fell, clutching his shoulder. Ela. I shoved Gideon toward the back wall. "Go! The loose board!" Gunfire erupted from all directions, splinters flying from the walls around us. I laid down covering fire, my peacemaker bucking in my hand. I was a terrifyingly efficient fighter, calm and precise in the midst of pure chaos. Another shot from Ila's rifle took down a man on the roof of the stables. She was buying us precious, life-saving seconds. Gideon scrambled through the opening in the palisade. I fired my last 2 rounds and dove through right after him. Outside, Nathaniel was waiting, firing his own pistol wildly toward the compound to keep their heads down. "Get to the horses!" I yelled, reloading as I ran. We sprinted for the ironwood grove, bullets whistling past our heads. One tore through the sleeve of my shirt, a hot kiss of death. We reached the horses, mounting in a panicked frenzy. As we spurred our mounts into a gallop, a single rider burst from the compound gate, charging after us on a powerful black stallion. It was Langdon. His face was contorted with pure rage, a rifle in his hand. He was faster than us, closing the distance with terrifying speed. "He's going to catch us!" Gideon cried, his voice shrill with terror. Keep riding, I yelled. Then I did the last thing they expected. I reined my horse in sharply, turning to face our pursuer. It was a desperate, insane gamble. One man against Langdon on an open plain. Langdon raised his rifle to take aim, but just as he did, another figure appeared on a ridge to our left. It was Illa. She had circled around, anticipating Langdon's pursuit. She was silhouetted against the moon, a figure of righteous fury. She didn't fire at Langdon. She fired at the ground, directly in front of his charging horse. The stallion, already at a full gallop, shrieked and reared violently as dirt and rock exploded at its feet. Langdon, caught completely by surprise, was thrown from the saddle. He hit the ground hard, his rifle flying from his grasp. I didn't hesitate. I spurred my horse forward, not towards freedom, but straight towards my downed enemy. I leaped from the saddle before my horse even stopped. My Colt aimed squarely at Langdon's chest as the man struggled to rise. "It's over, Langdon," I said, my voice as cold as a grave. Langdon, dazed and bruised, looked up at me, then past me to where Illa and her brothers were now riding up. His face, even in defeat, was a mask of pure arrogance. "You think you've won, Riley?" He spat, blood trickling from the corner of his lip. "You have a stolen wife, a broken-down brother-in-law, and a price on your head. I own the law in this county. I'll see you hang." "No, you won't," said a new voice. Sheriff Brody, flanked by two deputies, trotted his horse over the rise. But he wasn't looking at me. He was looking straight at Langdon. "What is the meaning of this, Brody?" Langdon snarled. "Arrest him!" Sheriff Brody dismounted, his face unusually grim. "Can't do that, Beaufort. Seems young Nathaniel Bishop here rode into town an hour before you snatched his brother, rode right into my office, gave a full sworn statement about his father's will, about your threats, about your plan to sell his sister to that outfit in Sonora." Langdon's face went pale. "Now I might be a man who enjoys a drink on your coin, Beaufort," Brody continued, his voice carrying in the quiet night. "But I'm still the law, and human trafficking, that's a federal crime. That brings in marshals. That brings in men I can't buy." Brody kicked Langdon's discarded rifle. "You went too far. Kidnapping, assault. I got enough to put you away for a long, long time." Langdon just stared, utterly defeated. The power he wielded, the fear he inspired, had evaporated into the cold night air. His entire empire, built on intimidation and cruelty, had been brought down not by an army, but by a brother's guilt, a sister's resolve, and the love of a man she thought had forgotten her. I lowered my gun. I looked at Illa, her face illuminated by the moonlight, and I saw not just a partner in a fight, but the missing piece of my own soul. The battle against Langdon was over. The battle for our future was just beginning. The ride back to the broken spur was a journey across a silent, altered world. The rising sun cast long, distorted shadows before us, painting the harsh landscape in the gentle hues of dawn, a stark contrast to the violence of the night. An oppressive quiet hung over our small party, heavier than the dust our horses kicked up. It was the silence of aftermath, where every unspoken word, every shared glance, was fraught with meaning. I rode slightly ahead, my shoulders set, my gaze fixed on the horizon, but my focus was entirely behind me, on Isla. I didn't feel the triumph of a victor. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a hollow ache of exhaustion and a profound, terrifying vulnerability. I had faced Langdon's guns without flinching, yet the thought of facing Illa in the quiet of my own home made my hands tremble. Our marriage, the lie that had brought us together, was now a chain whose purpose was served. He could feel her presence like a physical touch, a mixture of comfort and torment that twisted in his gut. He had won the battle for her freedom, but he knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that he was about to lose her all over again. Illa, in turn, felt his gaze upon her. Her hands, scraped and bruised from her grip on the Winchester, lay still on her saddle horn. She was processing the night in fractured images, the glint of lamplight on a gun barrel, her brother Gideon's swollen face, the satisfying thud of Langdon hitting the dirt. She had discovered a capacity for violence within herself she never knew existed, a ruthless pragmatism born of desperation. And through it all, there was Cormac. The ghost from her past had become a flesh and blood protector, a man who fought with a terrifying calm that spoke of a life she knew nothing about. The old hurt, the sting of his abandonment, had not vanished, but it was now complicated by a powerful new current of respect and a confusing resurgent warmth. Behind them, the Bishop brothers were oceans apart in their shared silence. Gideon rode slumped in his saddle, a man physically broken and spiritually shattered. Every hoofbeat was a drumbeat of his shame. He had been willing to sell his sister, and another man had nearly died to buy her back. There was no recovery from such a truth. Nathaniel, however, sat straighter. He had faced his fear and done the right thing, a single act of courage that had begun to cauterize the wound of his cowardice. He kept stealing glances at Illa, his expression a mixture of awe and profound apology. When the familiar silhouette of the Broken Spur ranch house came into view, a collective, unconscious sigh of relief passed through them. Gus was on the porch, a rifle cradled in his arms, his weathered face a mask of anxiety. The mask cracked the moment he saw us, replaced by a deep, weary relief. He didn't say a word, but as I dismounted, the old ranch hand met my eyes and gave a single, curt nod. It was a gesture that conveyed everything: approval, understanding, and a shared sense of survival. The house, once my fortress of solitude, felt different. It was a sanctuary now, a place we had fought for together. The air inside was thick with exhaustion. Illa, moving with an automaton's efficiency, gently began to clean and bandage Gideon's wounds at the kitchen table. I watched her from the doorway, my heart aching. I saw her compassion, the innate tenderness she showed to the very brother who had so profoundly betrayed her. It was in these quiet moments that I saw the woman I had fallen in love with, and the even stronger woman she had become. The reckoning began the next morning. Gideon, stiff and sore, appeared in the yard with his saddlebags packed. He stood by a hitching post, staring at the ground as if it held the answers he couldn't find in himself. "I can't stay here," he said, his voice a hoarse rasp, when Illa and I approached. He wouldn't look at us. "I don't deserve to look at this land, this sky. Pa always said I was weak, that I didn't have the grit for this life. I tried to prove him wrong his way, with deals, with money. I see now that was the weakest thing I could do." He finally forced himself to look at Illa, his eyes swimming with a wretchedness that was painful to witness. "What I did, what I was willing to let happen to you, there aren't words for it. I don't ask for your forgiveness, Illa. I have no right." Illa was silent for a long moment, studying her brother's broken form. When she spoke, her voice was clear and steady, devoid of malice but weighted with truth. "Forgiveness isn't a gift I give you to make you feel better, Gideon. It's something I do so that I am no longer chained to what you did. I forgive you so that I can be free." She took a step closer. "What you do with your own chains is up to you now." The small mercy in her words seemed to break him. A single shuddering sob escaped his lips. He nodded, unable to speak, mounted his horse, and rode west without looking back, a solitary figure swallowed by the vast, indifferent landscape. Later that day, Nathaniel found me reinforcing a corral fence. The younger bishop was hesitant, but his eyes were clear. "I'm going back," he said, "to Pa's ranch. It's nothing but dust and debt right now." He looked at his hands. "I don't know where to begin." "You begin with one fence post," I said, not pausing in my work. "Then the next. You don't look at the whole ruined ranch. You just look at the next post." "I have nothing," Nathaniel admitted. "Langdon took everything." I finally stopped, turning to face him. I saw the flicker of the old fear, but it was overshadowed by a new resolve. "I'll loan you 20 head of cattle," I said. "Good breeding stock. You'll pay me back when you can, with interest. You work the land, you honor your sister, and you become a man your own son would be proud of. That's the deal." Gratitude and shock warred on Nathaniel's face. It was more than charity. It was a vote of confidence. He shook my offered hand, his grip firm. "I'll make it right," he vowed, and for the first time, I believed he would. With the brothers gone, a new kind of silence descended upon the Broken Spur. It was an intimate, expectant quiet, filled with the presence of only two people who had every reason to part and one undeniable reason to stay. The legal foundation of our marriage was gone, leaving us standing on the far more treacherous ground of our own hearts. Meals were awkward, conversations were clipped, the space between us at the dinner table feeling as wide as the whole territory. A few days later, I found her by the new channel we had dug together. She was watching the clear, life-giving water as it trickled into the pasture. The sound was a gentle murmur of promise. The sun was setting, bathing the valley in a soft golden light. This was it. The time for hiding was over. I walked up beside her, the crunch of my boots the only sound. "The water's running clear," I said, my voice rougher than I intended. "Yes," she replied, not looking at me. "New life." I took a deep breath. "Ela, the annulment papers wouldn't be hard to file. Sheriff Brody would sign whatever we put in front of him. We could say it was a marriage under duress, for protection. No one would question it. You'd be free. Truly free." I held my breath, praying she wouldn't agree too quickly. She turned her head slowly, her dark eyes searching my face. "Is that what you want, Cormac? To be free of me?" The simple, direct question shattered my composure. I looked away, at the land I had bled for, which felt utterly worthless without her in it. "No," I said, the word raw and exposed. "God, no." I turned back to her, stepping closer, closing the chasm that had been between us for 5 long years. "What I want is to burn those papers. What I want is to start over. Not from 5 years ago, not from last week, but from right now. Here, standing on this piece of ground we saved together." The confession I had buried for half a decade finally clawed its way to the surface. "I was a fool, Ela, and a coward. I left to build a kingdom for you, but I was so afraid I couldn't be the king you deserved. Every dollar I made, every acre I bought, just felt like another brick in the wall I was building between us. I was so busy building a palace, I forgot I was too afraid to even send a letter to the queen." I shook my head, a self-deprecating sorrow in my eyes. "I'm so sorry." Tears she hadn't realized she was holding back welled in her eyes, blurring the image of the man before her. "And I was too proud," she whispered, her own confession meeting mine. "I told myself I was strong for not needing you, for not waiting, but every sunset was just a reminder of another day you hadn't come. Pride is a cold blanket to sleep under, Cormac." I reached out, my callous thumb impossibly gentle as it brushed a tear from her cheek. The touch was electric, a jolt of truth that arced between us. "Maybe we don't have to tear the walls down," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Maybe we just open the gates. If you'll let me, if you'll have me. We have a ranch to run, a life to build, a marriage to make real." She looked from my earnest, hopeful eyes to the land spread before them. Our land. She thought of the name of this place, the Broken Spur. It was never about a broken piece of equipment. It was about him, his broken past, his broken promise. It was about her, her broken heart. A slow, brilliant smile spread across her face, the first genuine smile I had seen in 5 years, and it was like watching the sun rise just for me. "Nothing here feels broken anymore," she said softly. And then she closed the final distance between us and kissed me. It was not a kiss of frantic passion or desperate relief, but one of deep, quiet certainty. It was a kiss of forgiveness, of acceptance, of coming home. It was the sealing of a new vow, a real one, made not before a drunken judge, but under the wide open sky, on the land they would now share. I wrapped my arms around her, holding her as if she were the anchor of my world. And in that moment, she was. The heart I had lost stood in my arms, not just found, but finally, truly, and completely home. And so the story of Cormac and Illa wasn't just about a fight against a villain. It was a testament to the fact that the hardest battles are often fought within ourselves. It's a story about how regret can be a poison, but redemption, earned through courage and honesty, is the cure. Theirs is a reminder that a person's worth can never be bought or sold, and that true strength is found not in avoiding our past mistakes, but in facing them and the people we hurt with an open heart. If this story of resilience, regret, and the rugged spirit of the Old West moved you, please help us share it with others. Hit that like button to let us know you enjoyed it, and share the video with someone who appreciates a story with real heart. And most importantly, if you want more tales like this one, Be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. Thank you for listening.